And welcome back to Capitol Tonight again. Holding elections in New York can be an expensive process. You hear it mentioned every time there's a special election for a vacant office. But a recent referendum held on Long Island brought up a new option, the idea of using private money to cover the cost of Nassau County voters deciding whether to use taxpayer money to build a new coliseum for the Islanders hockey team. My next guest wants to make sure private money stays out of public elections. Assemblyman Charles Lavine joins me from Long Island to explain the bill's proposal. Now, Assemblyman, this bill has not been introduced yet. You say they're still working on the language for this bill. Essentially, this was in response to Islanders owner Charles Wang saying that he would, or somebody suggesting that he could cover the cost of this special election to build a new home for his hockey team. Obviously, this is something that gave you some pause.
Well, the proposal went more along the lines of Mr. Wang paying for the election if the public referendum went the way Mr. Wang and the county executive wanted it to go. Fact of the matter is that the voters rejected spending nearly $500 million to bond out the expense of a new coliseum and possibly a baseball stadium, and as a consequence of the overwhelming defeat of the proposal, it's the county that will end up paying for the election, which will cost the county somewhere in the neighborhood of at least $2.2 million and perhaps more.
Okay.
And of course, had the voters endorsed the bonding, then Mr. Wang would have been obligated to pay the county for the cost of the referendum. So in effect, it was a contingency type of arrangement between Mr. Wang and his organization and Nassau County.
Okay, but just to play devil's advocate here for a second, $2.2 million is a lot of money for Nassau County, especially since it's going through some serious financial trouble right now. What's wrong with having somebody from the private sector come in and say that they're willing to use their own money? Obviously, in the case of the Islanders, this was something that he could have stood to benefit from financially in the long run, and actually probably would have been a pretty good investment for him. But what if it's a benign thing that somebody who's just saying, hey, look, I've got this money, I can help the county or municipality pay for this referendum?
Well, there are essentially two dangers. One danger is that this would have established a very problematic precedent, especially here on Long Island, where it's always difficult for developers to be able to get local government to agree to their proposals. In Nassau County, we have many, many different layers of government. Those who choose to attempt to develop have to satisfy many local governments in order to have their proposals adopted. And the great danger is that local government officials now, who often are not the most forward-thinking of representatives, will in effect lick their fingers, hold their finger up into the wind to determine which way the wind is blowing by insisting that developers now pay for referenda to determine whether there's some public support for their developmental ideas or not. It's the obligation, it is the job of local government and local government's representatives in consultation with the public to make these determinations. One of the ironies with respect to having referenda of the type that was suggested is that the votes are placed on days in which, set for days, in which the calculation is that there will be as few people as humanly possible coming out to vote. That's why this referendum in Nassau County was set for August the 1st. It was set for a Monday, not a Tuesday.
Okay.
Tuesdays are traditionally the days on which we vote.
Sure.
It was set for August the 1st as opposed to setting it in September when we have our primary elections, so that the cost, had we done it on primary day, would have been substantially and dramatically less. But it was set for August the 1st to make sure that as few people came out to vote as was humanly possible, and the hope being that the proponents would be able to drum up enough support in order to get the proposal passed. The other danger is that if we have a system in which private developers are paying for public referenda with respect to developmental concepts and ideas, that then those who have the most amounts of money will be able to sell these programs to the public, or attempt to sell them to the public, and what will happen is that a very tiny fraction of the public will come out and make a decision that will bind everyone in the county. For example, had this proposal passed, the county would then have issued bonds in the amount of nearly $500 million, which would, over the course of the life of those bonds, have cost the taxpayers nearly $1 billion to pay them off. And the decision as to whether those bonds should or should not be issued would have been made by a tiny fraction of the public.
Okay, Assemblyman, just to break in here for a second, though, but, I mean, obviously the offer or the suggestion that this guy would pay for this referendum didn't sway voters in approving a new Coliseum for Nassau County. I mean, there wasn't something that basically voters were then spurred to vote yes because of this issue. I mean, so doesn't that kind of suggest that this isn't that much of a concern?
Well, the concern remains that if a developer does want to engage in activity, we don't want local government forcing that developer to have to pay for a referendum. And as it turned out, the vote on that day was defeated by a proportion of about 56 to 44%, and in effect what happened was 140,000 people made the determination in a county of 1.3 million. That's how low the turnout was. So the basic idea is not that we are against development, and I am not against development, and I would love to see, along with many other Nassau residents, something responsible developed on the 77 acres in the center of Nassau County, in the important hub region, that would include a new stadium for the Islanders, but something that would be developed comprehensively to ensure that the stadium itself, the sports facility, would be a success. Okay, but and referendums, not be an isolated portion. Pardon me?
Referendums remain pretty rare in New York. I mean, we don't have statewide referendums, and even on the local level, these are things that maybe rarely come up from time to time. So again, the concern here is that I guess one rich person or a few very wealthy people could possibly hijack that process.
Could rig, in effect, rig an election. And the other fear is that local government officials who lack the strength of vision to make the determination as to what direction development should take will force developers to pay for these types of referendums in the future, which is going to end up simply costing the developers and the communities in the long run a lot more money to develop properties that ought to be developed not pursuant to referendum,
okay,
but they ought to be developed pursuant to the best developmental concepts available.
Okay, Assemblyman, unfortunately we're out of time. We're going to have to leave it there. Assemblyman Charles Lavine, thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you very much.